actually talking about the role of stock exchanges in driving responsible investing. And again, another wonderful team of speakers today. Thank you all for joining. Would you please be kind enough to briefly introduce yourselves to our audience? Thank you. Jamila, would you please take the lead for us?
Sorry, Asli, just a little bit of trouble hearing. I think it was me that you referred to.
Okay.
And a very, very good day to everybody.
Yeah.
A good day to everybody. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. Greetings to you from a very lovely spring day in Johannesburg in the southern tip of the world. Thank you very much for having us here. Thank you very much to the Turkish Investor Relations Society for pulling this together, and the sponsors, Goldman Sachs. My name is Shamila, and I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. We are the largest exchange on the continent of Africa and have for a long time been involved in sustainability. Personally, my background is actually in corporate strategy and finance, and it's an absolute pleasure to be involved in this agenda and to be joining you today on this critical topic. Thank you.
For the disruptions that are happening at the moment, I'm sure the deliberations will be well worth the wait.
Happy to have you. Thank you. Let's hope so. Recep Bey, on to you, please. Thank you.
Yeah, Aslanım, thank you very much. My name is Recep İldik. I'm the Director of International Relations at Borsa Istanbul, as one of the leading emerging markets and the market operators. I would like to extend our special thanks to Asli Hanım and all members of the whole team organizing this wonderful event. No matter the technical interruption, this is definitely excellent organization, and the content since lunchtime we've been discussing and hearing, actually listening. Thank you very much for your invitation, and thank you to Turkish Investor Relations Society. We're definitely honored to be a part of this event with distinguished guests who have a great experience and the leadership role in India, Colombia, and South Africa.
Thank you, Recep Bey. Let's just move on now to the questions. I would like to direct this to Tankar first. Sustainability issues such as climate change, biodiversity loss, social inequality, these are key problems facing all of us, and they are becoming more visible by the day. We all have a role to play in helping tackle them, finding and implementing solutions. In our previous panel, we have discussed the importance of transparent and consistent reporting. And in light of all this, can you please share your views on how stock exchanges can contribute to drive responsible investment and more sustainable business?
Thank you, Asli. See, we need to see two fundamentally different and yet equally important issues here. The stock exchange, as we call it, a market infrastructure institution, plays the role of a quasi-regulator, administrator, encouraging companies towards adhering to better standards of governance. And the stock exchange is also a company, in many cases a listed company, and that has its own responsibilities in being a showcase to the world. Just to give a background, India essentially adopted the UN guiding principles on responsible investing, businesses and human rights in 2011, and then there were these national guidelines that were brought out by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs in the same year, 2011. Since then, the regulator has basically mandated business responsibility reporting across, first the top 50 companies, 100 companies, 500 companies, and then the top 1,000 companies. So, we have discussed business responsibility reporting earlier, so I would not go deeper into that subject. But what happens here is that from an exchange perspective, it's the role of the exchange, as we believe, is to nudge companies towards standardized reporting. You could have any kind of standards. You could have the GRI, you could have the SASB, the IIRC, or as we have in India, the BRR. So, as an exchange, we provide guidelines that look at standardized reporting by companies. NSE is also a signatory to the UN Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative, and it's committed to corporate sustainability and sustainable investing. And beyond nudging companies, NSE also has regularly fostered research in responsible investment, ESG and related areas. So one of the reports that comes to mind is one which looked at the ESG practices of 50 listed companies. Such analysis not only nudge companies to be sector leaders, but also provide a lot of, a very good tool to institutional investors. Apart from this, NSE also has brought out several indices. These indices are, an ESG index, an enhanced ESG index, or a sector leaders index. These indices, they not only appeal to the asset management companies who make, passive products on them like ETFs, active products on them like funds, but also, make the companies that are part of these indices stand out. Now, coming to the second part of my report, my answer, where now you see NSE as a company. So as a company, NSE is very committed to responsible investment and be a responsible corporate player. We have our own wind power generator. We have successfully reduced the carbon footprint from about 20 kilotons to about 13 kilotons. So we are very committed to primary education, elder care, sanitation. So this is NSE as a company. So to answer your question, we play both roles. As a responsible administrator that guides companies in the right direction, and also as a company that serves as an illustrative example.
Great, thank you. As we have just discussed, obviously, the key sustainability challenges are a worldwide thing. It affects all of us, and there's a role to play for everyone. No step is too small. But we know that we need effective stakeholder collaboration. So how can stock exchanges collaborate effectively with other key stakeholder groups in driving responsible investment? And maybe you could give a few good practice examples of how strong collaboration between the exchanges and other stakeholder groups have actually helped or helping drive responsible investment and financing towards achieving the sustainable development goals and tackling climate change. So if I may initially direct this to Recep Bey, and I would be happy to hear Shamila if you have any additional comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aslı Hanım. Actually, collaboration is, of course, key to make progress on sustainability, to promote sustainability, sustainable finance. Throughout the whole, stakeholders, get involved with the exchange business listed companies. One of the, I think, good examples I can share with you that the sustainability platform we as Borsa Istanbul has established in 2013 is a kind of collaboration platform, sustainability platform consisting NGOs, regulatory bodies, sectoral associations. The banks, for example, the Banks Association of Turkey, Turkish Capital Markets Association, Corporate Governance Association, Business Council for Sustainable Development Turkey, Global Compact, CDP, Turkish Industry and Business Association, Turkish Investor Relations Society, of course, primarily, and universities, some think tanks, Turkish Exporter Assembly, for example. Some of them, they're all included to this sustainability platform to promote the sustainability and ESG issues in the capital market. So by taking a consultative approach, we start discussing these topics. How can we align these ESG with not only with the strategy and the business plan of the stock exchange itself, but also with the strategies and the business operations of the processes and the procedures of all our stakeholders, primarily listed corporations. And recently, actually, we as Borsa Istanbul is given an assignment by the Vice Presidency of the Republic of Turkey, who is chairing the action plan of the Turkey Coordination Council for the improvement of investment environment in Turkey. It's in Turkish, it's called TÜYİD, the initials of the Turkish name of this coordination council for the improvement of investment environment. And the action were assigned by this, and this is important because this topic is paid attention at the very highest level by the committee chaired by the vice president of the country. And they ask us to come up with some regulatory framework, some solutions, incentives, some other mechanisms to mobilize the Turkish corporates to do more on ESG and sustainability to attract more international capital. So to improve the current regulatory environment for sustainability, for example, is one of them. And under our coordination as Borsa Istanbul with the various, members of this sustainability platform, I just counted the names, many multi-parties, joint work. We're thankful to each and every member of this sustainability platform who contributed great value and with their work. And we formed 3 different task groups or working groups. One is awareness task force to increase the awareness in the capital markets, and also not only in the for the listed companies, but also for the relatively large unlisted or privately held companies, especially by targeting the companies that are the part of the international supply chain as exporters, because the ESG criteria and the factors are also assessed by the big buyers, importers from Turkey. So we also wanted to include them. That's why the Turkish Exporters Assembly got involved also to the work of this platform. And in addition, through the work of awareness working group, we organized several workshops, technical workshops, conferences with PRI and some other related parties to convey the message of the importance of ESG, especially from the investors' perspective, as the investors now are making continuously and increasingly the ESG factors, criteria into their investment decision process. So we have to be aware, we all have to be aware of these developments and get ready and need to provide the demanded information by these investors. Plus to inform our listed companies and other stakeholders, this awareness group prepared actually help us to update our sustainability guide, which originally initially published by Borsa Istanbul in 2014, and then with the help of the members of the sustainability platform, we updated this sustainability guideline very recently and published, or guidance for companies recently. Another working group under this TÜYİD was the incentives group. Again, there are various parties that share their recommendations, suggestions, comments about the various incentives that can be introduced by policymakers, by the government, again, to mobilize the listed companies and others to not only report their ESG efforts, but also implement those. So, since the Sarbanes-Oxley, the failures in markets and the corporate scandals, etc., that increased the importance of corporate governance since 2000, and the Sarbanes-Oxley addressed these failures by bringing new regulations for corporate governance. But of course, increasing regulation to some extent also increasing the burden on the shoulders of listed companies. So we also believe that, I mean, we have to incentivize and build some proper mechanisms to help companies to put more effort on this way. I mean, not only governance, also on ESG. That's why we pay special attention to this incentives, and we provide we gather our recommendations for the incentives and share it with the Ministry of Finance and the Vice Presidency of country, and hopefully in the second part of this working group timeline, we're expecting at least some of the incentives suggested by the sustainability platform will be implemented in favor of also companies. And the last one was the regulation. Regulation to actually regulation task force focused on the regulatory framework, in particular about adding environmental and social risk management issues to the articles of corporate governance compliance report with the comply or explain basis, and disclosing them within the framework of public disclosure. And this document was prepared by this regulation task force jointly by the members of the platform as a legal regulation proposal for the capital market regulatory authority, capital market board in Turkey. So the framework aimed to determine the basic principles of that should be reported by companies, taking into account the issues that are important, especially to foreign investors or international investors who are demanding more and more transparency and information, especially material information, to make more accurate assessments of the ESG performance of companies. So we very recently the Capital Market Regulatory Authority approved with some revisions, approved our proposal and issued a new communique, which is maybe a small step for our colleagues who already made this long ago, but it's a giant leap for us. It's a base, and based on this concrete base, I'm sure within a few years we will make even much further progress on this way. So according to this announced communique, all public companies now subject to corporate governance communique are requested to provide sustainability-related disclosure together with the corporate governance principles compliance reports in line with the sustainability principles compliance framework. So in their annual reports, they have to disclose this information based on comply or explain basis. The disclosure is mandatory, but the implementation of sustainability principles is voluntary. But in the long run, we expect, of course, it will also encourage and enforce because of the competition and based on the request of the international investors to encourage and enforce companies to also implement these principles. So it's a kind of new regulations, a milestone for sustainable efforts in Turkey that will trigger the company's efforts for transformation. And we made it all together with the members of Sustainability Platform. So I want to share this collaboration example with you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Recep Bey. Everything starts with a step. So we think it's very important that there is such a regulatory framework right now for companies to report. And as Turkish companies, certainly we are looking forward to the upcoming incentives that you mentioned. So thank you for that. I would now like to bring in Shamila, and let's talk a bit about the main international standards, the frameworks, the guidelines that are used for responsible investment. So, Shamila, can you tell us a bit about the situation in South Africa in terms of your experience there of integrated reporting, especially how it's changed and the other standards that are used? How have they helped to drive the uptake of responsible investment so far? And what can be done, in your view, to further this progress?
Thank you very much, Asli. And I just want to also extend my congratulations to Recep and to Turkey and Bursa Istanbul on, I think, that huge step forward, of course, which we know in the world of exchanges is not often an easy thing to achieve. So just again, congratulations, Recep, and to, I'm sure, the entire team and ecosystem that worked together to get that going. And I look forward to seeing what that will look like in terms of disclosure in the market soon. So to get to your question, Asli, in South Africa experience, I think, Recep has done a great job of outlining generally what exchanges can do, and of course what they've done, what you've done in Turkey, and before that, Tevtankar as well, to be able to understand, what that context looks like. So if I reflect on South Africa, it's not that different. The work that we've done goes, all the way back almost 2 decades, if I think about the genesis of this. Here, we've often rooted that in governance and saying that this is fundamentally a governance consideration. The explicit consideration of your environmental, social, and governance issues is part and parcel of what the governing body needs to do. And so that's the point of departure. So in relation to reporting and standards and frameworks, where this sits is effectively saying that this notion of integrated reporting is premised on integrated thinking. And that integrated thinking, if you look at the King Code, which is really where where integrated reporting is coming from, the notion of integrated reporting is coming from, the code is very clear. And it's a governance code and talks about the fact that one needs to consider these issues of sustainability as part and parcel, core and fundamental to this change that we need to see happening from a very shareholder-centric or shareholder capitalism to a more stakeholder approach and a view. And where this comes from is, of course, the broader sustainability discourse, which suggests that over time, the models that we've pursued for development have actually resulted in many of the inequalities that we're seeing up to now, and has really created some of this free rider problem, has also effectively said that, many of the issues have been externalized. So companies have internalized much of the benefit, but often the outfalls and the shortcomings have been externalized to society and the environment. And so that's where we find ourselves. And so businesses fundamentally need to rethink from a governance perspective their value in society. And so that is a governance issue about thinking about it there. So when I think about South Africa and how that's developed, and you consider that there's an entire governance ecosystem, much to what Recep has already outlined, that actually sits around companies. There's an act that regulates companies, and that's not necessarily from the exchange itself. But of course, if you're a public company, then there are listings rules that are also there. There are governance codes that one can look to. And in South Africa, we're very fortunate that, in fact, the King codes are home here. Mervyn King is South African, and we as the JSE have adopted the King codes and then made it a requirement for companies to start reporting in accordance with the provisions of King, which, as you know, also includes that they need to consider environmental, social, and governance issues. So when we go back to how that actually factors into companies and the responsibility, it is actually premised on fundamentally changing the thinking and the behavior of companies. So what we've tried to avoid where possible is a tick box approach to reporting, and the standards and the frameworks have a particular role to play when they are related to the concept of integrated thinking. So you go about thinking about this, you rethink fundamentally your business, its role in society. You use the integrated reporting model, which asks for the explicit consideration of the 6 capitals. So going beyond purely the financial into the other capitals. Where are you drawing from them? How do you work with them, and what is your outcome on those capitals when you've produced your outputs as a business? So that explicit consideration and bringing their thinking into how you as a business create value is really what is underpinning that. Then how you tell that story and how you report on that information, of course, is where the standards and the frameworks also then play a huge role. So if you look at the dominant standards and the frameworks and quickly bring those in, GRI, for example, which of course is very popular globally and probably has perhaps the biggest following, so to speak, in terms of people reporting in accordance with GRI. GRI brings in the breadth. it brings in a number of different indicators that one could look at and then apply according to what is relevant for you in your business. So King, again, in its fourth iteration, is the apply and explain regime, which of course is then what is used by companies in South Africa that are listed on the JSE. And so that governance code, of course, becomes regulation effectively for listed companies and using that apply and explain regime. And then, of course, the standards, like I said, come in. So GRI brought the breadth, TCFD, which is now becoming another dominant framework, of course, then brings in the specificities around climate change. If we look at climate change, for example, has always been factored into most of the standards or the reporting standards and frameworks. But where TCFD is slightly different, of course, I think fundamentally is that notion of bringing in the scenario analysis and planning. So what is the scenario? What are you trying to achieve? So that's what that brings in. And then if we look at some of the other frameworks, like a SASB is very much materiality view and bringing that in as well. So if we consider this, I would consider integrated thinking and integrated reporting as a base, and everything else is driven out of there. Once you've got your thinking right, and once you understand what your business is doing and you've integrated that into strategy, then how you report is up to you based on what you think is the best way to tell that story in order to be able to advise society at large, and yes, mostly investors in the case of how companies have tailored their communication, in how you've created that value and what your prospects are going forward, and doing that in a way that gives them information that they can use to be able to tell that story better. And in this case, of course, the focus is on the non-financial or the pre-financial information, as I prefer to call it when we consider the ESG factors. So that is effectively the way the JSE thinks about it in South Africa. And we're very fortunate in that we have an ecosystem, I think, in relation to both governance and accounting that's quite mature and very supportive. So we work together very closely with, for example, the Codes for Responsible Investment South Africa, which of course applies mostly to the investment community, asset owners, asset managers, and the like. Then we've got IRC, which is the Integrated Reporting Committee of South Africa, and of course is the group that sits and looks at integrated reporting particularly, does a lot of thought leadership around that, and helping to actually produce the how of you can go about this and what you need to report and what that needs to look like. So we have those sort of bodies. The JSE itself is a signatory to the PRI, and of course the founding member alongside Borsa Istanbul with to the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchanges Initiative. So we work together in that realm to try and see what we can do to push on both ends, which is the investor side and the issuer side for the listed companies. So when we give that guidance on disclosure and we actually push that within that ecosystem, that is to try and get better disclosure from our listed companies, and of course working together with the investment community to increase awareness on that. So we've effectively arranged our activities at the exchange around 4 pillars, the one being on regulation and what we can do around that. And that's where the King Code comes in. Apart from King's sort of apply and explain regime, there are a few mandatory disclosures that we require that relate to ESG, on gender disclosure, on racial disclosure, and on the remuneration policy of companies. And then there is also the second part of our activities arranged around the tools and services that we offer. This talks more to how we then bring into the market the tools that you can use to actually allow the money to be reallocated towards more sustainable development aims. And so that would be your green bonds, the number of different instruments that we offer in that space, the futures contracts, and what we're constantly looking at to be able to drive the money in that direction. And then what we look at the last bit is your engagement and advocacy. And that talks a little bit to what I've already mentioned around how do we create that education, how do we get people to be more involved in this conversation and understand why it matters. So that in our context is really the way we have tried to create that enabling environment for better disclosure, and of course to be able to allow for a reallocation of capital towards more sustainable development and responsible investment means. So once we create those instruments, the importance of that, of course, is that particularly in our market is largely an institutional market, which means huge sums of money are actually invested on the stock market via institutional investment. And once you have instruments that allow for that flow more easily, it allows for that allocation function to happen a lot better. So that's how we see the governance aspects, the tools and instruments aspects, and the advocacy engagement coming together together and where we play in. Of course, what I haven't said is within that, there are a number of players that we then engage with, of course, across the markets, between the regulators, between the, the different bodies, the policymakers and the like, to try and behind the scenes, of course, see what is the role we can play and how we can encourage in that regard where we can, and take leadership or offer expertise, or in other ways, of course, ourselves learn to be able to ensure that our market can grow and that can be more internationally relevant, of course, and keep up with the aims of sustainable development.
Thank you very much. Very eloquently put, indeed. And if I may go all the way from South Africa to South America and take this as an opportunity to learn about the good examples that the Colombia market has done here. Now that we have all the connections in place, Carlos, would you please give us your views and share your expertise on this? Thank you.
My name is Carlos Barrios. I'm Director of Investor Relations Office and Sustainability of the Colombia Securities Exchange. I'm really honored to be part of this panel and invitation from the Turkish IR Society. I'm going to, let me talk about a little bit about the journey that we started in 2014 when we created the IR recognition program, which is on a voluntary basis for listed companies, promoting very standard disclosures in our market. Since then, since 2016, we introduced the requirement of sustainability report for listed companies, and we have worked very close with GRI in our market. So companies are part of this program reports not only in Spanish, reports also everything in English, because our market is the international investors are very active in our market. So from the as a market administrator in the Colombian market, we also have created thematic bonds like green bonds, social bonds, and sustainable bonds since 2017. But a part of the good results that we already achieved from the offer side, which is the companies in Colombia are really accustomed to report sustainability based on GRI. Today we have 32 companies that are part of this IR program. And from those 32, 29 report on GRI, 29 report SDGs, and 16 report are part, or Dow Jones Sustainability Index. So our listed companies are really accustomed to report sustainability on an integrated basis, basically. But from the demand perspective, I would like to share something that has been very successful for us. We created last year the Task Force for Responsible Investment. We created together with GRI, with PRI. Also, part of the task force are all the financial associations are part of this task force. The pension fund, the Colombian Pension Funds Associations, the Association of Banks, the insurance companies, the brokers associations. So they are also. We have the World Bank is part of the Colombian office is part of the task force, including the embassy of the UK and the embassy of Switzerland, which these two countries have been promoting to green the finance in our market. Another thing is that some of the results we have seen right now is, for example, 17 financial institutions are signatories of PRI in Colombia. So the awareness of climate change and best really start using ESG criteria in their investment process has been very successful, but it's a lot of things need to do until now. But I think that something that we would like to share is that stock exchanges cannot do this alone. We need to be really very coordinated with issuers, and together we define the market participants, because we cannot drive this alone. We can, and also we need to lead by example. If we ask companies to report sustainability, the stock exchange as a company need to do it too. Or for example, if we want to ask investors to start using ESG criteria, there's mentioned, our investment decisions are also based on ESG criteria. So, for example, we have a private equity fund that have impact investment, or we are also promoting as a corporation enhancing education skills, basically based on in technology, in innovation, and focus only on young people with lack of opportunities. Those type of things they're doing in order to lead by example. So that's part of the things that we have done. We have done training, for example, for not only for listed companies, but training for economic journalists in Colombia, or analysts in how to read the sustainability reports together with the GRI and PRI. So that's the things that we have done. We are also, as you can see, we have been very active promoting GRI standards among participants, but also the things that they need to be done is to enhance the investors' capacity in terms of using or reusing ESG criteria in their investment decision.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlos. Certainly, we will see more of these examples as we collaborate with each other and work towards the goals, including further our capital market and aligning companies with the UN's SDGs, considering the 2030 agenda. Now, the final note, we have 5 more minutes. I would just briefly like to discuss the implications of the COVID-19 fallout on responsible investment. What has been the impact so far, and what do you think will be the long-term ramifications will look like? If I can first get your views, please, Tirthankar, and then we will just briefly ask Jamila and our other panelists to provide their views. Thank you.
Thank you, Asli. Well, if one of the things that COVID-19 has done, it has essentially made awareness about climate change far more real. The implications of not taking climate change seriously are ever more apparent to a lot more people today in COVID-19, in the post-COVID-19 period than were earlier. India as a country is one of the world's largest developing nations, and faces the brunt of climate change more than many others. There have been several initiatives in terms of shifting away from non-renewable fuels like oil. India largely imports all of its oil. Mostly 80% of its oil is imported. India has a lot of coal, but coal does pollute. So the move to renewable energy has to be made yesterday. And if I may tell you, I mean, over the last 10 years, the 10-year CAGR of solar power production in India has been around 90%. Yes. So every year, India's capacity of solar production goes up by about 90%. As if that was not enough, in terms of momentum, that has always been there. India is a part of the global solar alliance in wind energy as well. There has been significant moves made. But what has happened since COVID-19, and that's I think important, is people have understood how climate change can really affect. So Delhi is one of the world's most polluted cities. Particularly when winter comes, the AQI levels in Delhi reach above 300, so which is extremely polluted. But this year, across the several months of the lockdown, one of the points that has been noticed is how with clean air, with lack of economic activity does have a big price, but one of the fallouts has been the clean atmosphere that people have sort of experienced. And apart from awareness about what are the ramifications of not spending on public health, not spending on climate change, not spending on sustainable governance, sustainable environment policies, one of the things that has sort of come about, COVID-19 has laid that bare in India. So what happens is, people have noticed, one, the fear of COVID-19 and how lack of public health undermines our restitution activities. And on the other side, people have also noticed the positive aspects, the positive externalities of having clean air. And Delhi especially, has been a big change. So for India, what has happened is investment or interest into sustainable or environmentally conscious investment has picked up in a big way. Companies that are in this space in terms of providing renewable energy, or are in grids which where they supply renewable energy, these have sort of been lapped up by the market, especially in the last sort of bull run that we have seen. So to summarize, what I would say is, COVID-19 has been many things to many people. I guess we would be, years together, we'd be writing about 2020. But what it has done is it has brought one of the most important worries that we have today, climate change, back to the fore. It has made us realize that unless we take serious cognizance of climate change today, and especially in a country like India, the ramifications over the years could be dire. So markets have realized it, and I think that one would say is one positive fallout of COVID-19.
So thank you very much for being with us today, and we'll have a 3.5 minute break before the next session. Thank you very much.